My name is Michael Jalewski, and today I will be reviewing what a college education is truly for. To briefly touch on an agenda for the lecture, I will be covering throughout the presentation an introduction to the topic, supporting arguments, finding the fine line between all influences, and ending on a solution. To begin, the college education cost can be up over $180,000 for a bachelor's from an Ivy League university without any additional aid or scholarships for all 4 years. Looking at the attached graph shows us the difference in not only the cost of education over the last 40 years, but in addition shows us the difference in between private and public institutions. Over 35 years ago, the cost of a private institution was 4 times what a public institution was. It is not much different nowadays in trend upward, however up to 6 times more. So why is it that private institutions can grow at a steeper rate? For one, there is a class of society that can afford and refuses public institutions. And they would afford that at any cost. Therefore, private institutions can increase pricing at a higher pace. On the counter end of that, many times public institutions are also state aided, so additional funding is coming from elsewhere. In addition, on the topic of cost of college, it is shaping people's lives and decision making from their teenage years on. Coming from a manufacturing background, there is a major shortage of skilled trades, and welders being one of them. It is ironic that 20 years ago, computer engineers and mechanical engineers, doctors and lawyers were scarce, where how the tables have turned now, that we have come to a point where welders, plumbers are scarce. Moving on, Caldwell mentions in his writing that the value of a social life or to meet one's future spouse may have been worth $10,000 per year, but is it really worth $60,000? In addition, it is difficult justification to pay these levels of tuition for a creative writing degree. What I have done here is paraphrasing. These were not the exact words Caldwell said. However, paraphrasing translates text into your own words. On this topic, along these lines, the return on investment is poor. Therefore, this drives the wrong behaviors of deciding on a major based on potential earnings versus following true dreams. It is important to not let this skew your decision altogether. Just having the realization that the return on investment can negatively impact a teenager or their parents' career choice for them. Along those lines, we move into summarizing. Summarizing condenses or takes a chunk of text and shrinks it into its main components. The financial payback of achieving a college education is declining as the ratio of the population that has graduated increases, based on supply and demand. Many are pursuing more flexible, less concentrated degrees that are becoming so vague the graduate is not qualified to do any one thing. The takeaway to me from this is that how vague is too vague. I think there's 2 points within this paragraph, and one of them being we have in the American education system degrees like a business bachelor's that you can go into literally any field that does not necessarily require special skill set such as a surgeon. And then on the other hand, we have degrees such as a fertility specialist, who is very, very, very pigeonholed to one area. So, taken away from the summarized paragraph, I think it's important to, again, be aware and have awareness of how vague is too vague and how concentrated is too concentrated. Especially in times of economical downturns, I think it is important that much of the population is versatile and has flexible education. Moving on to what is value added and what is not value added when talking about college educations. There is a fine line in between being too specific, as I had touched on before, maybe in the field of fertility specialist, versus too vague. So coming back to the business bachelor's. The business bachelor's is absolutely right for somebody going into finance or accounting. However, I think a creative writing degree is the epitome of too vague. A piece of advice or a suggestion, and why the MBA is so popular and holds a high value, is because the business master's typically is well-rounding a technical bachelor's or a concentrated bachelor's. So often we see a mechanical engineer pursue a business master's. That seems to be the best of both worlds in the sense of versatile yet concentrated. Moving on to quoting. Quoting is appropriate when it is a statement that cannot be said better in one's own words. Caldwell mentions the Star Wars opening lines, and in that, paraphrasing or summarizing them takes away from their authenticity. Americans with the brains to master the most challenging college courses, Murray argued, is probably closer to 15% rather than 45%. The fact of true mental capacity for our education systems is astonishing and complicates decision making even further. So with all the other foreign factors, parental input, society, and the cost piece of decision making for a college education, here's another curveball. No two brains are alike, and no two individuals learn the same. There is a small category of people that have the capability with full work ethic to succeed on some of these college programs. Therefore, at the end of the day, not to jump to a summary too soon, but maybe college is not for all. Moving on into inflation. 25 years ago, Ivy League schools were a bargain at $10,000 per year, Caldwell mentions. So, how much of this stems from inflation, going from $10,000 to $60,000? Looking at our illustration here, just for example, eggs 50 years ago were 45 cents per dozen. Today, they are in between $1 and $1.50. Therefore, we can see a 200% rate of inflation over 50 years, maybe 250%, but 600% over 25 years seems drastic. We all are familiar with the 2.5% cost of living adjustment standard for the most part, and the math just doesn't add up. The drastic increase in cost of education has far surpassed the pace of cost of living or inflation. So what is driving the increase in the cost? First off, I think student loans are more available in the past decade, past two, rather than the 20th century, enabling more students to chase dreams, but also allowing for the cost to increase even more so. Also, as the population ratio is higher in education and degrees overall, every job will require a slightly higher level of degree. Someday, McDonald's could require a bachelor's degree. Another reason can be simply society's views on higher education. And lastly, overall lower count of good blue-collar jobs because of outsourcing, driving more of the population into college and universities. Further controversy. Part of this population for the $60,000 per year education is pride. Simply pride. And it could simply come down to growing up in a class where your dad went to Harvard Law, so you follow in his footsteps to Harvard Law, despite cost. Another controversial topic when talking about the cost of college is on-site learning capabilities versus classroom knowledge. And what I mean by that is there are many professions that can be entirely taught and learned on-site, however still require a basis of a bachelor's. On the other hand, there are professions such as an anesthesiologist who needs to absolutely study and have it down pat prior to entering the field whatsoever, including residencies. So, coming back to vague, how vague is too vague, or how specialized is specialized enough, but yet flexible, this brings up another point of how critical is that bachelor's. Touching on a famous quote we often hear, one door closes and another one opens. This is where that flexibility comes into play. So, again, a controversial topic when it comes to deciding of degree options and college cost at the end of the day. Moving on to my conclusion. Looking at a chart here of college cost increasing since 1980 and comparing college tuition versus median family income. The median family income shows an increase based on inflation of approximately 200% over the 30 years, but yet the college tuition shows an increase of almost 600% over those same 30 years, showing aggressively steeper acceleration. So this is proof that it is not simply inflation. In conclusion, my solution, I guess I should say, is there is no one single answer for all. All should be on case by case, basis and based on individual scenarios. What is most important for students leaving high school and moving on to college, or any kind of next steps, and for parents with students in that position, and as educators and as employees, as people of society, it is just important to be aware. Awareness of all of these different aspects that feed what is today our very, very expensive American college costs.